Have you been able to gain access to practice yet? Because I know it's only like a really short list of people that are able to go out right now.
Not this week.
So when's your turn to get to go on into the gates?
Next week.
All right. Based on what we have seen, though, in this week from video, what we've heard, what have been some of the early standouts to you here in this first week of full pads?
Well, I live next to a former NFL coach, and he always tells me the first week of practice is all about a coach with new toys.
I like it.
And he says, the assistant coaches, it's always about, I want to build some depth because I know I'm going to lose some people injury-wise. But Joe would always tell me that. He said, a head coach, he's just worried about the new toys. It's like Christmas morning for him. He gets to play with the new toys for the first time. And so it's interesting already how Sean is trying to get, you know enough about Emmanuel Sanders. You know what type of football player he's going to be. The other part is Ty Montgomery. Again, another new toy, a guy that has played some running back, also played some flex. He's played at wide receiver. He's done some return work, getting him into the offense. And, again, no playing football unless you practice it. They ain't been doing it. You got to practice. You got to practice to play football, man. Come on, this ain't video games. So getting those two guys involved with it from the receiving standpoint, and that's going to be a big battle, I think, for the final sort of spots at receiver, because you can see where special teams are going to get involved here with a player like a Benny Fowler, who's done that. He's been through this before. He was with the Broncos, been with a number of teams since 2014, and he's had some experience on special teams. Marquez Callaway. Marquez did a little bit of return work at Tennessee, but now they got him working as a gunner. So that's new to him. But he knows what he's got to do to make this football team.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's some elements here that you're trying to piece together to build depth, but also to build the right special teams unit. And Greg McMahon would always say, listen, there are guys that are really good at it. And some of them haven't played it before. He said, just because of their status in high school and college, they haven't been asked to play special teams. Now all of a sudden they play it, and he said some guys are really good at it. Other guys, they got to learn it because they know this is their ticket to the NFL. I think about Josh Hill. When Josh came in, he didn't overwhelm you athletically. He was a big target guy, could catch the football pretty well. You could see in the padded practices he was a good inline blocker. But you wouldn't have given him an A on anything other than he was a big man, a big-sized target. How he made this team originally, special teams.
Mm-hmm.
J.T. Gray made this team, special teams. So I think you're seeing that early on. The early reports on Kamara, and again, he looks like Alvin Kamara of old, and he's a guy that they got to have healthy. Just because of his elements, speed and quickness and mismatch downfield as a runner and a receiver. He's special in that category. So that's, to me, offensively, that's the best news that you got, that Kamara's back and looking like the Alvin Kamara of old. Offensive line play is always the final piece of the puzzle. I don't care if you high school football, if you college football, if you're professional football, it's the final piece. It's five guys working as one. It's not like a defensive lineman that, you can rush the passer and you can stand out in that category. No, you got to work as a unit there, and you're trying to build up some depth across the board. And early on we've seen that McCoy has played center and Ruiz has played at the right guard position, even though I think they're giving Ruiz some work before media gets in at the center position. And all this stuff about, he's got to learn the cadences. Not on this team. He don't need to be an A student on that. Not saying he won't be, But he doesn't need to be an A student now. Reasoning why? Number 9. He makes those calls. It's all about timing and footwork and the physicality part of the game for Ruiz. And Zach says it best. He don't play like a rookie. He don't practice like one. He understands this game at a certain level. So we'll see what happens at that center guard position, kind of how it turns out. The surprise guy there that has looked pretty decent has been Ethan Greenidge, who they kept last year on the 53-man squad. And I remember talking to Zach during some of the shows we were doing about, this was a guy who was basically inactive almost every week. But they wouldn't put him on the developmental squad. Reasoning why? I think they figured somebody else was going to grab him. Mm-hmm. Now, again, there are athletes that are better than Ethan, but it's his positioning skills, his technique work, his leverage. He's really good at it, and he's gotten better. And he's somebody to watch as the practices go along here. Is his development in that he might not look picture perfect, but he gets the job done. And again, there's a reason that this undrafted free agent from Villanova, you kept him on the 53-man roster every week, and you didn't slide him on developmental. Reasoning, somebody would have snagged him up. And also, too, Adam Troutman has really gotten high grades for his inline blocking. He's a big target guy. Still, the rapport's got to be a little bit better with him and Drew in the passing game. But he looks as advertised. Smart, a big man. He can lay down that block. And also, he's not going to be your anchor on the football 400-meter relay team. But, man, once he catches it, he's a load to bring down. But I think the one guy that has gotten rave notices, and we've talked about this for months, and I hear it in Sean's voice, almost just like Ed sort of tells you the same sort of thing about the same player. Almost every interview Sean Payton has talked about, we got to find a way to get Deonte Harris to football more. As a runner, as a receiver, whatever. And he's looked good. And you know what? He's athletically arrogant. And I like that in a player. Now, sometimes some of them got a little bit too much of it, but he's got enough that I like in that he really thinks he can make a big play every time he touches the football. And Sean brought it up during the season, and I picked it up on a couple of the coaches' shows. He sort of repeated himself about Deonte and sort of made that comparison to Tyler Lockett, who's with Seattle, who's a little bit bigger player than Deonte, but they have some similarities overall in their style of play. And I think he is such a key to this offense because if you can keep Thomas and Sanders healthy all year long and you got Cook at tight end, man, Harris becomes a real weapon in his ability to make something happen after he catches the football. There is nobody on this football team like him from that standpoint at wide receiver, that ability to catch, snag it, and then he's up the field. And you get kind of one shot at him, and then you see the back of his sneakers. He's gone. Because some of the other guys are bigger players. You look at Emmanuel Butler or little Jordan Humphrey. They're bigger guys. They don't have that real scoot after the catch. Now, they can give you a lot of problems because of their size, but it's going to be interesting, those final cuts of how that gets down. Understanding Traquan Smith had a pretty good day of practice today and snagging some football. So it's big for Traquan. And the one thing that I see in Deonte, I don't see in Traquan. He does not play with that sense that I'm going to beat you every time I'm on the field. Mm-hmm. You watch Michael Thomas when he practices, he embarrasses those corners. He tries to. His deal is, listen, I'm out here, and I'm going to show you just how good I am every time I step on that field. Now, you got some vets that, this is practice. But Michael, he don't take it that way. It's all business for him, and he can embarrass these cornerbacks the way he plays. What I see in Traquan is he doesn't have that element. He's talented. He's got some big play skills. He's improved as a route runner. But I think that almost that oomph of confidence, he doesn't have it yet. And I think for a receiver, didn't we see it last year even at LSU? Every time they hit the field, man, Justin Jefferson, Jamar, it was Terrace Marshall, Racy. Man, when they got on the field, them guys are covering me. I'm going to beat you every time, every which way but loose. And I think you have to have that, Matt, in those one-on-one matchups. I don't see that in Traquan on a consistent basis. I think that's the one area for him he has to work on more than anything.
Now, we don't get to watch practice, Mike. We get the 2 minutes of video that LSU releases. And
All
right.
No, I'm going to keep that to myself. Go ahead.
All right. Well, what did you get to see that?
No. I got no comment on any of that.
All right. So, based on what the coaches have told us or what sources might have told you, Mike, what stood out week one out of LSU?
Almost like, I grew up with a guy that ended up being a great horse jockey during his career in Shane Sellers. And he could look in a field, and you could watch these little horses that are, like 1.5, 2 years old running around. He would always tell me, that's the one. That's the one. Come on, we only took a look at him for a few minutes. He was like, no, that's the one. I think similar to what I told you about head coaches and new toys, early on, Arik Gilbert on offense. I mean, I think you have seen nothing like that at the tight end position for LSU. That type talent as a freshman. And how you know it, not what the coaches say. Listen to what the upperclassmen are saying. And they, their deal is, gee, man, look at that guy. And it's almost like going back to my youth, and I hear Shane talk about, man, that horse, that's the one that I'm going to tell my dad to buy. That's the one, that one. And it's, you see it in Gilbert, that he's got a chance to be special as a football player. Now, one thing I do know, in high school, I'm sure he got a lot of double-team action. As long as Jamar Chase is on one side, and you got Terrace and Racy, man, he ain't never going to see no double-teaming. He's one-on-one, and he's going to scare the bejesus out of cats out there when he's out on that football field because of his size, speed element. And I think early on, that certainly he's one of the new toys, so to speak, in the arsenal here of this LSU football team that he's not watching. He's playing. Mm-hmm. And then the other part, I think, offensively is building up depth along the offensive line. And you've already heard Coach O talk about Xavier Hill playing at the left tackle position, right. Marcus Dumerville at the right tackle position. I just finished doing a study that actually I sent him the information on it, and I went past the last 6 years in the Power 5 teams, Power 5 conferences, the teams that played there. What positions had the most injuries during a season? Clear cut. Guards 1, tackles 2. So guess what? You better build up there. And you know what? You might have to use that freshman somewhere along the line at the tackle position. Guard position, you seemingly have a little bit, you got better depth there. Even though Bradford hasn't played, Cordell, is another guy. Chason's had certainly some playing time, and certainly Ingram has. But when you look at it across the board, you got Charles Turner now playing right tackle. Okay, just his build, he's not going to play guard. The same thing I told you about Liam. Either he's a center or he's a right tackle. Mm-hmm. There's no in between there. He's not built to play the guard position. I do think it's interesting because somewhere along the line, you're going to have, if the numbers are what they normally have been, those are the two spots where you're going to catch injuries. It's a high collision spot when you play guard and tackle. Now, you know what's one of the lowest? center that you don't have. It's way at the bottom of the list as far as injuries are concerned. And you missing time. Either that or those centers are pretty doggone tough. That's all I can tell you. But they don't miss much playing time, those starters at the center position. And it's a high collision spot at guard and tackle. So I'm interested in how the development of those young players are, especially at tackle, because those are the spots that if you look at it, and Austin's got the injury and you got Rosenthal on the other side, who backs them up? And Ed is telling you, Xavier Hill, Dumaville, Charles Turner. And none of them took a snap in a game yet.
Mike, is there a veteran option there? Because, that's the same thing stood out when we've talked about on the show this week. You got two true freshmen as your back. You got a lot of good interior players who played some ball for you. But out on the edge, I mean...
No experience.
Is there any way that there are veteran guys that could cross-train? Like we've seen at times, like Adrian McGee was an interior player, but when they needed him, he kicked out and played left tackle. Are there any guys on this roster that are like that could be versatile enough to kick out?
I thought about it with Bradford, but, my concern is probably the weight, how he would handle the speed guy. Okay, that would be the concern. If I stuck him out at the left tackle position, could he handle the other team's best edge rusher one-on-one? Because we know now in this offense, it's all about quick setup, find the target, the ball comes out of that pretty quick. I do think this year, this may get extended a little bit. Because of the fact, I think one of Myles' strengths as a player is his deep ball skills. And I've heard Slinger talk about it numerous times. Listen, we got to get the football out of there, and we got to try 4 or 5 deep passes downfield. And they're open. But he says, in watching those type plays, a lot of them, they're wide open, the quarterback misfires. Or the receiver loses sight of the ball. And he says, you get 3, 4, 5 chances like that in a game. You got to hit on it. You got to hit on the majority of those. You can't hit on all of them, but to hit on the majority of them in that spot. So that's why protection is going to be paramount, especially if you're going to ask Myles to throw the ball a little bit deeper downfield, which I think they will this year. I think that's part of his game and the adjustment for LSU's offense. Joe was terrific in that short intermediate part of the game. Every once in a while, he'd sling it deep downfield. And he could do it. But, man, Myles has got that gun that he can get it down there. And you got some receivers with a size matchup downfield and a tight end with a size matchup downfield. That'll be I think the one part of the game I'm interested in watching the most for LSU. Is do they try to extend that field a little bit longer because of Myles' arm strength, which I think they will, to be honest with you. And, I would try to take advantage of that, especially with the receiving core I have, because I know next year my receiving core, as far as receivers are concerned, they're not going to quite have the same size that I've got this year with Racy, with Terrace, with Jamar. Those 3 guys not only have speed, but they also, they match up well downfield against a small cornerback. So I don't know of any you could maybe try, but, most of those guys have been interior players. Now, Bradford has seen some time at tackle in high school. I just wonder a little bit that because of his size, how well he would handle the speed element in the Southeast Conference, because you might not have a great pass rusher, but you got a guy from a quickness standpoint that could outflank you. And then, Myles can't throw the football if he's staring into the sky.
Andrus Peat, broken thumb. Any reaction to that, or not a big deal because we assume he'll be back in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, he's going to be back before the start of the season. Listen, I can't explain why some guys have those type injuries like Andrus has had, and they legit. You break your bone, you break your thumb. Come on, that's people say all kind of foolish things, but listen, you can't maneuver until that heals. especially as a lineman. So, he's just had that sort of trend. And I can't tell you why, but it'll be something I'll do one day about trending injuries. That you start to see it with certain people.
Mm-hmm.
That, they get one injury, and then it's another, and it's another. And why some guys play 8 or 9 years and nothing.
I know.
It's just amazing. But I think that the good news with that is it gives you some play with Nick Easton, who is used to playing. He has been a starter at both center and guard, and that Andrus will be back for week 1 against the Buccaneers. And, he's been a starter there. The cohesiveness is there between him and Teron. And especially if Arik stays at center, those three have worked together. So I don't think that's a major thing. Injuries are going to happen. Look, it's part of the game. This ain't like walking across, the street, in the Lafourche Parish. I mean, they got a lot more traffic in the city than they do in the country.
Mike, what about Zach? What about Zack Baun? A lot of word that he was running out there with the ones this week, man. Thoughts there?
That's not the big surprise to me was I got a call from a retired coach, I should say. He's semi-retired. He's like, man, I've been reading all this stuff on Twitter and Facebook about Zack Baun's athleticism. He said, you know what? I looked at when he came out, look at your draft book, and you wrote on there he's a former high school quarterback wide receiver. He played basketball. He was the 100 and 200 meter champion in high school. You ain't no scrub athlete if you can do that, right?
Yeah.
And he said, it's almost like, Columbus. They discovered America. He's a good athlete. And I was like, listen, I get it. But for some people, they didn't know maybe the background with Zach. One of the things I see in him that's impressive is his ability to shoot off the snap. He has got a real quick initial step off that line of scrimmage and get up the field. My thinking early on is, hey, you want to get him as many reps as you can. This is a team that plays nickel over 70% of the time. So there'll just be 2 linebackers on the field. The bottom line is, if you just go into 2, if he's healthy, Alex Anzalone's one, and Demario Davis is the other. So you want to get Zach some work in the other part of the game in which he's had some experience but not a ton, and that's from the coverage standpoint, playing in reverse. And you might say, oh, well, I watched film on him, and he did pretty good. He's been a short-range cover guy. All I know, if I'm a veteran quarterback and he's not rushing the quarterback, he's not rushing me, I'm throwing the football right where he's at. I'm going to test him on his cover skills early on. I think Ryan Nielsen, who's a really sharp guy, he's going to come up with a package, along with Dennis Allen, that's using Zach sort of like that designated pass rusher. Somewhere moving him around because, man, he can do that, Matt, so well. Some people can make that adjustment from being a high school receiver and quarterback to playing defense. He made it very well in a short time, and then he broke his foot early on in his career. So he's such a puppy to this, playing in reverse. But, boy, can he move in forward position. And I think so. You take advantage of that. And this game is about how many good starters you have, but it's also about how many good role players you got. And I think Zach, as a pass rusher, he's going to be pretty doggone good in that role.
Mike Detillier is with us on Twitter, at Mike Detillier. Chat's brought to you by Sazerac Rye. Let me give you the obligatory Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill question. They've had limited opportunity, Mike, but anything of note here through a week in pads?
You kind of hear it in Sean's voice about Jameis, about how well he's picked up this system and the scheme of the Saints. Him coming in thin, to me, is a sign of commitment that he wants to make a big impression on this football team. Listen, he does kind of know, like the rest of us, that this is the last ride for Drew Brees. And I think he's telling everybody, hey, listen, when Drew's not going to be here, I'm going to take over. I would want the backup quarterback to feel that way. If you don't have that feeling, then I don't want you. I want a guy, he's got that kind of bravado about him, and he feels that way. How well he gets rapport with the receivers and backs and tight ends, I think you're going to have to get him some reps. And one of the things I think you'll see Sean do is give Drew some time off. Come on. Practice is for the unskilled. Drew don't need to be out there every day throwing passes. You're going to have sessions where Drew's going to sort of sit it out. And I think that's one of the things here that you look at, that Jameis isn't getting some time in. Because this is sort of going to frame your painting on what you want to do for next year. Because, again, you're going to have to make that decision. You got Jameis at a super reasonable price this year to come in. And I think he's the type of player that I don't think you're ever going to get him away from making some throws. You say, what the was that? But he's going to make some throws. You say, wow, man, that's a tight one to throw. And I just think when I looked at it throughout the years and doing this over 30 years, I think strong-arm quarterbacks always feel they can get a ball somewhere that sometimes they put a ball at risk, so to speak. But they've been like that all their life because they have such a strong arm. A guy like Drew Brees or a Peyton Manning or a Phillip Rivers, that's not what they grew up doing. They didn't have the strongest arm. They figured it out another way to do it. And it's with accuracy and with touch. I think that's the part with Jameis. We may not even know this year about him, depending on what happens with Drew on the touch part of how that has progressed. I do know one thing. Sean has always talked highly about him. He talked highly about him before the draft when he came out and he was the first overall pick. He has spoken high volumes about him when the Saints have played Tampa Bay in the past. And I think Sean feels as though, we're not going to get an opportunity to draft that young quarterback. We got a guy who was the first overall pick in the draft. Man, hey, we got something here. And with Taysom, we'll just see about the development. I think this year, what you've seen Taysom do in the past, he will do again. I think that's what you'll see from Taysom. Similar things that we've seen in the past. Here's the thing, Matt. How many people get compared to him today?
A lot.
And how many can do it like him?
Not a lot.
None that I've seen. So it goes to show you got a unique talent in Taysom who might not necessarily be a starting quarterback, but boy, he's a really good football player. And you find ways to help a team win. And, for this season, I always say this. You can only win the championship in the season you play in it in. You worry about 2021 and 2021. I worry about 2020 because that's the year I'm playing in this year to win it in. Because if you start worrying about next year and all this other stuff, I'm telling you, the distractions, I think, simmer from the coach and the coaching staff onto the players. My thing about it is Drew's our guy. That's who it's going to be. If he gets hurt, we'll make that decision. But for right now, Drew is clear-cut the guy. That's who's going to be the major factor on if this team can get to the Super Bowl. How healthy and how strong he'll be in January. Because this is a pitch-and-catch game. And your quarterback better be playing well in January.
Mike, first, LSU's had 3 opt-outs. None. Neil Farrell's the only one that's acknowledged being COVID-related, but Kary Vincent, Justin Thomas, who's now in the transfer portal, any of those more significant than others?
Well, Kary, because he's played for 3 years. Here's my thought on Vincent. I thought he would come out in January because I looked at it, and I see the strengths and weaknesses with Kary. In that he's an inside player. He can play the nickel, corner. He can play safety. And, man, I know one thing. He can run like hell. I mean, so, he is going to be impressive when he works out for people. Now, he's not going to match up well against the bigger receivers, and I think he's sort of a trail corner. And I always wonder a little bit about the corner. He gives up a lot of cushion to a receiver, and with his type speed, you figure he can catch that up. But he's got some technique work to do, but he's got 3 years of film on him and his speed. So, I thought last year, in January, I thought he'd be like a late third-round pick.
Oh, wow.
He'd be a top 110 type of selection. Now, again, in this draft class, it might be a little different because you might have a ton of juniors coming out in this draft class. So you had to know. But, again, if you look at his history with his dad, the heart issues there, I sort of understood it from that standpoint. But really, I thought you'd lose Kary back in January. I didn't think he would return for another season at LSU. And workouts, he'll be terrific, just because he is a top of the rung ladder type athlete. He really is. Again, as an outside corner, he's not going to match up well because of the size, but he can play inside. He can play at safety, and today, that's versatility is key for him.
Let's get to your questions. Kevin in the YouTube chat asked Mike, do you anticipate the loss of Mike Nolan affecting this defense?
Mike's a heck of a coach, and I'm going to say it's not a major loss, even though I have a tremendous amount of respect for Mike Nolan as a coach. And he could relate as an older coach, he could relate very well to the younger player. And he was real sharp. I mean, he was like a comedian, too. I mean, man, you throw him a line, he'd throw it right back to you. And I like that. Man, I really, especially at my age, I like that part. And so he is going to be missed because of his experience. Now, Hodges is a young coach, sort of his first merry-go-round in the National Football League. Had been coaching the colleges. Let's see how well that'll work out. And Sean, I do know one thing. When you work for him, you putting in some hours. But Mike Nolan's one really good coach that you hated to lose, but you understood it. He got to be a coordinator. He wasn't a linebackers coach.
Yeah. Robbie says, ask Mike, what can we expect schematically from Scott Linehan that might differ from Joe Brady?
I think one of the things with Scott, just because of the talent, I think the talent sort of tells you that they're going to stretch the field a little bit longer, the deeper ball. That's just a gut feeling of mine, but Scott's been that way as a coach early on. I think they're going to want to pound the rock. Even though I thought last year they did a really good job running the football, I think some of that, and you can almost hear it from Ed, some of that was plays that they would run the ball, you got stuffed in the backfield. Then all of a sudden, Clyde hits like a 30-yard run.
Yeah.
So it sort of skews the fact that you had some runs sort of bammed up in the middle. I think with the talent, the power talent that they have with Tyron Davis-Price and Chris Curry, and the speed element of Emory, I think that Scott will try to pound it a little bit. Once you get kind of teams on their heels, because here's the deal. If you're going to play coverage against me and you playing smaller guys, I'm going to play big boy. I'm going to run it at you.
Yeah.
Okay, and as soon as you go back, then I start throwing the ball again. So I think it'll be a little bit schematics, where a little bit more power running football, but also I think stretching the field a little bit deeper because that plays into Myles' game.
Ask Mike, this is from Cliff. Ask Mike, where does LSU generate a pass rush this year, and who's the sack leader?
Man, that's a good question. Man, if I knew that, man, will it be Andre Anthony, who they've talked a lot about? Arik Gilbert looks the part.
We've talked a lot about Andre Anthony for 4 years.
And now it's his deal to do it. He's got to do it because this is his opportunity. On the hoof, man, Arik Gilbert, I'm telling you, Matt, when you're going to see that guy up close, that's what I want a defensive end to look at.
Good.
But who has Ed talked about more than anyone? The two freshmen.
Ojulari, yeah.
And Webb.
Yeah.
He's talked about Webb and Ojulari over and over and over again. And it'll be interesting to see how both sort of mix and matches with that up front and trying to get a mismatch up front. And, one of the things I see the Chiefs have done in the past, the Chargers have do. They line up their two best pass rushers on the same side of the field sometimes. I'm not saying that's not going to happen here, but I can see where that gives a team some issues when that happens. So I wish I had a better answer to that. I would hope it would be Andre Anthony because this is his time to do it. But just listening to the coach, it may come from the freshman.
Mike Detillier is with us. He's on Twitter at Mike Detillier, SaintsReport.com, MikeDetillier.com, Saints News Network over at SI. And our chats with Mike are brought to you by the one and only New Orleans original Sazerac Rye Whiskey. And I still got your bottle right here if we want to see it, Mike.
Okay, I'll see it. Do you want me to? No, listen. It'll be my number 2 spot. Listen, I can't get rid of my Jack Daniel's Black Label. That's been on the agenda for. But man, listen, that could be a close second.
Fair
you know
enough.
what I mean?
We'll make it happen, Mike. Thanks for the time as always.
Thank you, brother.
We'll see you. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.